The Carter Grand Hotel stood as a beacon of luxury in the heart of New York City. The elite came and went, indulging in excess, unaware of the invisible workforce that kept the place spotless. For them, the staff were just shadows, passing by in neatly pressed uniforms, offering silent nods of acknowledgement before fading into the background. For Mia Brooks, being invisible was a survival skill. She worked tirelessly, cleaning rooms that smelled of expensive colognes and perfumes, changing sheets that cost more than her monthly rent. She never dreamed of being noticed. Until tonight. She hadn't planned to fall asleep. She was just supposed to clean the VIP penthouse suite, the last room on her list, before dragging herself home to the tiny apartment she shared with her 16-year-old brother, Leo. But exhaustion had other plans. Mia barely remembered resting her head on her arm for just a second while scrubbing around the enormous marble bathtub. Just 5 seconds, she thought. Just a moment to breathe. And then, darkness. A sharp click echoed through the suite as the door swung open. Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Hospitality Group, loosened his tie and sighed as he stepped inside. The day had been brutal. Meetings with investors, calls with international partners, and a dinner that had lasted too long. All he wanted was silence and a hot shower. With swift, practiced motions, he tossed his jacket onto the armchair, unbuttoned his shirt, and ran a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. The bathroom was his sanctuary, a place where he could momentarily escape the demands of running a multi-billion-dollar empire. But when he opened the bathroom door, expecting an empty space bathed in soft, ambient lighting, he instead came face to face with an intruder. Or at least, that's what he thought at first. His body tensed as his sharp blue eyes locked onto a figure slumped against the toilet lid. A woman dressed in a housekeeping uniform, sleeping like she hadn't rested in years. "What the hell?" His deep voice echoed through the marble-clad room. Mia's eyes flew open. Disoriented, she jerked upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. The bucket of cleaning supplies beside her tipped over, sending mops and sprays clattering to the floor. She blinked at the man towering over her, shirt half unbuttoned, eyes burning with disbelief. Oh, God. This wasn't just a guest. This was Ethan Carter, the billionaire, the boss. And she had just fallen asleep in his penthouse bathroom. Mia scrambled to her feet, hands raised like she was about to be arrested. "I didn't steal anything. I swear. I was just, She stammered, her exhausted brain struggling to catch up. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. "So, now my bathroom is a dormitory?" he asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. Mia flushed. No, I was just..." She groaned internally. "Nothing I say is going to make this sound better." Ethan exhaled slowly, studying her properly for the first time. She looked wrecked. Her brown hair, which was supposed to be neatly tied back, had fallen loose, framing a face that was clearly running on empty. The dark circles under her eyes were proof of sleepless nights, and her uniform, clean but slightly oversized, suggested she had never worn anything tailored for her. She looked exhausted. For a brief second, his anger wavered. But before he could say anything, Mia sniffed the air. Then, to his utter confusion, she frowned and muttered, "That coffee smells burnt." Ethan blinked. "What?" She pointed toward the untouched coffee cup piece on the sink counter. "Over-roasted beans. Way too bitter. Whoever made this tried to mask the taste with sugar, but it's still awful." Ethan stared at her. His usual barista had prepared that coffee. He hadn't even tasted it yet, but he knew for a fact the man prided himself on his technique. Testing her, Ethan picked up the cup and took a sip. Mia was absolutely right. Intrigued, he set the coffee down and studied her again, this time not as a random housekeeper who had fallen asleep in his suite, but as someone with a remarkable gift. "You figured that out, just from the smell?" he asked, curiosity edging into his voice. Mia hesitated. Yeah?" Ethan crossed his arms. "Try this." He walked to the minibar, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and twisted off the cap. Handing it to her, he watched as she took a careful sip. Mia's nose scrunched. "This is cheap. The carbonation is too aggressive, and there's an aftertaste, probably because they used lower quality minerals." Ethan smirked. She was right again. What kind of palate does this woman have? Mia, on the other hand, was panicking. She needed to leave, right now, before she got fired, arrested, or worse. "Look," she said quickly, backing toward the door. "I know I messed up. So if you're gonna fire me, just get it over with." Ethan tilted his head. "I haven't decided yet." Mia felt her knees go weak. What does that mean? But before she could protest, Ethan handed her another cup, this time from the minibar. "Try this one." Mia hesitated, then took a sip. Instantly, her face twisted in disgust. "Ugh, this is even worse." Ethan grinned. For the first time that night, his exhaustion was replaced by something else. Interest. He had met world-class chefs, tasted Michelin-star dishes, and spent years refining his own palate. But never had he met someone who could detect so much, so precisely, just from a single sip or sniff. And she was a housekeeper? Not anymore. Ethan set his glass down and looked at her, his blue eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "Tell me, Mia," he said slowly, "how would you like to do something different?" Mia frowned. "Different how?" Ethan smirked. "Starting tomorrow. You're coming with me to the kitchen." Mia Brooks did not sign up for this. One moment, she was scrubbing floors and struggling to stay awake. The next, she was standing in front of Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO of the Carter Hospitality Group, who, for some reason, had decided she was worth his time. She should have been terrified. Scratch that. She was terrified. Yet as she stood there, staring at the man who held her entire future in his hands, there was one overwhelming thought in her mind. Why me? Ethan Carter had always been a man of instincts. His instincts had made him a billionaire before the age of 30. They had led him to build an empire that spanned luxury hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, and high-end resorts. And now, his instincts were telling him that Mia Brooks was different. That talent, that raw, undeniable ability to detect even the slightest flaw in flavors, that wasn't something you could teach. As he watched her, still flustered from the bizarre turn of events, Ethan made a decision. "Here's the deal," he said, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "You come work for me. 1 week. No cleaning, no scrubbing toilets. Just taste testing." Mia blinked. "What?" Ethan smirked. "You'll work directly with my chefs. If you prove yourself, you stay. If you fail," he shrugged, "you go back to your mops and buckets." Simple. Mia's stomach twisted. She wanted to laugh. This had to be a joke. A billionaire was offering her, a housekeeper, a chance to work in a kitchen. Not just any kitchen. The Carter Grand Hotel's world-renowned restaurant? This was insane. And yet, what did she have to lose? Mia had dreams once. She had spent years dreaming of becoming a chef, of running her own kitchen, of creating dishes that people would remember for a lifetime. She had even made it into culinary school. But dreams? Dreams didn't pay rent. They didn't cover medical bills. They didn't keep Leo, her 16-year-old brother, fed. When their parents had died in a car crash, Mia had become everything to him. His sister, his mother, his only family. So she dropped out, took any job she could find, and ended up here, cleaning rooms in a hotel she once dreamed of working in. And now, Ethan Carter was standing in front of her, offering her a way out, or at least a chance at something more. Mia swallowed hard. "What's the catch?" she asked, crossing her arms. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You don't trust me." She laughed dryly. "You're a billionaire, and I'm a housekeeper. Do you really think this doesn't sound like a setup?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "No catch, just an opportunity. But if you're too scared to take it—" Maya hated that. She hated being underestimated, hated that people always assumed she couldn't handle more than what life had handed her. And most of all, she hated that Ethan was right. She was scared, but she was more scared of waking up in 10 years, still scrubbing floors, wondering what would have happened if she had just taken a chance. She took a deep breath. "Fine," she said. "1 week." Ethan's smirk widened. "Good." The next morning, Mia walked into the Carter Grand's industrial kitchen for the first time. It was chaos. Chefs shouting, knives slicing through vegetables, flames bursting up from pans, steam curling through the air. And at the center of it all, Chef Vincent Hayes, the head chef, a culinary legend, and, by the looks of it, a complete nightmare. His eyes landed on Mia, and his expression darkened. "This is the girl," he said, looking at Ethan with pure disbelief. Ethan simply nodded. "She's got a week." Vincent scoffed. "What am I supposed to do with a housekeeper in my kitchen?" Mia clenched her fists, biting back the urge to snap. Ethan glanced at her. "That's up to her." Mia steeled herself. She had survived worse than an arrogant chef. Vincent sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine. You want to prove yourself? Make this better." A plate was shoved in front of her, a dish of pan-seared salmon with a citrus glaze. Mia frowned. She picked up a fork, took a bite, and grimaced. She swallowed, then looked Vincent dead in the eye. "The fish is overcooked." The kitchen fell silent. A dozen chefs turned to stare at her. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" Mia took another bite. "You left it on the heat too long. The citrus glaze is too acidic, and it's overpowering the natural flavor of the salmon. You should balance it with a touch of honey, something to mellow the sharpness." Vincent's eyes burned with anger. No one talked to him like that in his kitchen, especially not a housekeeper. "You think you can do better?" he asked coldly. Mia held his gaze. "I know I can." The challenge had been set. Vincent threw a knife onto the counter. "Then prove it." Mia's hands shook as she picked up the knife. This was it, her one chance. If she failed here, she'd go back to cleaning floors before the week was even over. She focused, blocking out the noise, the pressure, the doubt. She filleted the fish with precise, practiced movements, adjusted the glaze, reduced the acidity, perfected the balance. When she was done, she plated it carefully and stepped back. Vincent picked up a fork, took a bite, and froze. The entire kitchen held its breath. Then, without a word, Vincent set his fork down. He looked at Ethan, then back at Mia. His expression was unreadable. But instead of yelling, instead of tearing her apart, he simply said, "Not bad." And for Mia, that was the greatest compliment she had ever received. Ethan watched the scene unfold with mild amusement. Mia Brooks was a fighter. She might not realize it yet, but she belonged here. Not in the background, not as a shadow, but in the spotlight. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt excited, because he had just bet on the right person. Mia had won the first battle, but the war had just begun. Mia Brooks had won her first battle, But she wasn't foolish enough to think it was over. Far from it. If anything, she had just painted a target on her back. The moment she stepped into the kitchen again, she felt it. The stares, the murmurs, the resentment radiating off the staff like heat from an open flame. She wasn't one of them. She hadn't spent years in culinary school. She hadn't climbed the ranks from line cook to sous chef. To them, she was just a housekeeper who got lucky. And luck didn't belong in a kitchen like this. Ma arrived early, dressed in a crisp white chef's coat that felt like a costume. Chef Vincent Hayes wasn't in sight, but the rest of the kitchen staff, the real chefs, were already busy prepping for the lunch rush. As she stepped forward, a massive man with arms like tree trunks blocked her path. His name was Marco, and he was one of Vincent's most trusted sous chefs. "So," Marco said, wiping his hands on a towel, "you're the one the boss hates." Mia stiffened. "Excuse me?" Another chef, a petite but sharp-eyed woman named Sienna, leaned against the counter. "He's not wrong. Vincent hasn't shut up about you since yesterday." Mia swallowed. "Great," Sienna smirked. "Don't get too comfortable. No one lasts long when Vincent wants them gone." Mia set her jaw. "Then I'll just have to prove I belong here." Marco let out a low laugh. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't belong here." Then, before Mia could respond, he shoved a knife and a pile of onions in front of her. "Prove me wrong," he challenged. Mia took a deep breath and picked up the knife. If they wanted a show, she'd give them one. Chopping onions was basic work. But Mia knew this wasn't about onions. It was a test, a way to see if she would crack under pressure. She picked up the knife and got to work. Chop, chop, chop. She moved fast, keeping her cuts clean and precise. No wasted movement, no hesitation. One by one, the other chefs started to watch. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to mess up, waiting for her to fail. She didn't. When she finished, she looked up at Marco. He raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Not bad," he muttered. "For a maid." Maya clenched her fists, but bit her tongue. She had bigger battles to fight. The moment Vincent arrived, the tension doubled. He took one look at Mia, then at the neatly chopped onions, and let out a low scoff. "Oh, congratulations," he said dryly. "You know how to use a knife." Mia refused to let him get under her skin. "Would you like me to prove something else?" she shot back. A dangerous silence filled the kitchen. The other chefs exchanged glances, waiting for Vincent to explode. Instead, he smirked. "I hope you like pressure, Brooks," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "Because today, I'm throwing you into the fire." He gestured toward the grill station, the busiest, most intense part of the kitchen. "Think you can handle it?" Mia's heart pounded. Every chef in the room was watching, waiting for her to say no, to back down, to fail. She lifted her chin. "I can handle it." Vincent's smirk widened. "Good." The lunch rush was brutal. Mia barely had time to breathe, let alone think. Orders were shouted at her from every direction. "Medium rare steak, 2 pastas, salmon, move." Her hands flew across the station, flipping steaks, checking temps, plating dishes. Too slow, too hot, too raw. Vincent watched like a hawk, correcting her with sharp words, making sure she felt every mistake. She sweated, she fumbled, but she didn't give up. By the time the last plate left the kitchen, Mia felt like she had just run a marathon. Vincent walked over and stared at her for a long moment. Then, with zero emotion, he said, "Not terrible." Mia nearly collapsed. For Vincent, that was practically a standing ovation. That evening, as Mia sat in the break room, utterly exhausted, Ethan Carter walked in. She stiffened, instantly feeling self-conscious, in her flower-covered chef's coat. "How was your first real day in the kitchen?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Maya wiped a hand over her face. "Brutal." Ethan smirked. "You're still standing." "Barely." He held out a bottle of water. She took it hesitantly. "Why are you here?" she asked. Ethan tilted his head. "You still think I'm messing with you?" Mia hesitated. "I don't know." Ethan's smirk faded slightly. "I don't waste my time, Mia," he said quietly. "If I didn't think you were worth something, I wouldn't have bothered." Mia's stomach flipped. For some reason, those words meant more than they should. But before she could respond, Ethan straightened. "I have a new challenge for you." Mia groaned. "Of course you do." Ethan grinned. "Tomorrow night," he said. "You're cooking for a private tasting." Mia's heart stopped. What?" "A tasting," Ethan repeated. 5 dishes, your best work." Mia's mind raced. She had just barely survived today, and now he wanted her to cook for him. And not just him. Guests, critics, investors. She wanted to say no. But then she remembered Leo, her bills, her dreams, and suddenly she found herself nodding. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Ethan's smirk returned. "Good. Don't disappoint me." And with that, he was gone. Maya leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow night, she would be cooking for Ethan Carter himself. No pressure. The next morning, Mia woke up with a knot in her stomach. Today was the day. She had spent all night going over flavors, techniques, ingredient pairings, anything that would give her a fighting chance. Because tonight, she wasn't just cooking. She was proving herself. But before she could step into the kitchen and prepare for Ethan Carter's private tasting, a new storm was already brewing. A storm aimed directly at her. Maya barely made it through the staff entrance before she felt it. The whispers, the stares, the thinly veiled smirks. She knew kitchen gossip was ruthless, but this was something else, something targeted. Then Carla, one of the housekeepers she had worked with, came rushing toward her, phone in hand. "Mia," she hissed, pulling her aside. "You need to see this." Mia frowned as Carla shoved the screen in her face. It was a headline. "Ethan Carter's secret affair with a housekeeper." Newspaper. Mia froze. She skimmed the article, and her stomach dropped. Inside sources at the Carter Grand reveal that billionaire CEO Ethan Carter has taken a suspicious interest in a young housekeeper, Mia Brooks. Could this be more than just business? Witnesses claim to have seen the two in close conversation late at night, sparking rumors that the hotel mogul may be mixing business with pleasure. Maya's hands shook as she scrolled down. There were pictures, one of her and Ethan talking in the break room, another of him handing her a water bottle, and the worst one, Ethan walking out of the kitchen after their conversation last night, taken completely out of context. A sharp laugh rang out from behind her. Mia turned to see Julia, one of the receptionists, smirking. "Wow," Julia drawled. "That was fast. How'd you manage to get into the CEO's good graces so quickly?" Mia's stomach churned with anger. "I didn't," Julia cut her off. "Relax, sweetheart. We're all impressed. Most people have to actually work their way up the ladder. You just had to bat your lashes at the right man." Mia's hands curled into fists. This was bad. If people believed this, it wouldn't just be gossip. It would destroy everything she had worked for. She shoved Carla's phone back at her and stormed into the kitchen. She had bigger things to worry about. Mia had barely stepped into the kitchen before she spotted Chef Vincent Hayes. He was standing near the prep station, arms crossed, watching her like a predator waiting to pounce. "You made the headlines, Brooks," he said smoothly. "I'm not doing this with you, Vincent." He leaned in. "Oh, but you are. You think Carter's little obsession with you will last? You're just a distraction. And when he's bored, you'll be nothing again. Mia's chest tightened, but she refused to let him see her break. She turned back to the sink, pretending he wasn't there. Vincent chuckled. Since you're so determined to prove yourself, he mused, I took the liberty of modifying your little tasting event tonight. Mia's heart stopped. She turned slowly. What did you do? Vincent grinned. Instead of 5 dishes, you'll be preparing 10. Mia's stomach plummeted. That's impossible, she said. Vincent shrugged. Then you better get started. Mia wanted to scream, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said, Fine. Bring it on. Vincent's smirk faltered just slightly. Mia turned back to her station, ignoring the storm raging inside her. She had 10 dishes to prepare, and she would not fail. By the time Mia finished her last dish, she was shaking with exhaustion. She barely had time to breathe before she was summoned to the private dining room. Ethan Carter was already seated, looking calm, composed, unreadable. Mia steeled herself and stepped forward. The first dish was placed in front of him. A moment of silence. Then Ethan took his first bite. Mia held her breath. He chewed slowly, his expression giving away nothing. Then finally he looked at her. This, he said, is excellent. Mia exhaled sharply. Then he moved on to the next dish, and the next. Each time, he took his time, analyzing every bite. By the 5th dish, his brow furrowed slightly. Something's off. Mia's heart stopped. Ethan pushed the plate away. It's too salty. Mia's stomach plummeted. She knew she had tasted every dish before sending them out. None of them had been oversalted. Something was wrong. Then she saw it. Vincent, standing just outside the dining room, watching her reaction. A slow, satisfied smirk on his face. Mia's pulse spiked with rage. He had tampered with her dish, and now, in front of Ethan, she looked incompetent. But before she could say anything, Ethan spoke. This one was messed with. Mia's eyes snapped to his. Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Vincent. You sabotaged her, he said coolly. Vincent's smirk faded. Ethan set his fork down. Get out! Mia stared. Vincent froze. What? Ethan's voice was calm but deadly. You heard me. You're done here. Vincent's face flushed red, but Ethan didn't flinch. This is my kitchen, Vincent spat. Not anymore, Ethan said. Silence. Then finally, Vincent turned on his heel and stormed out. Mia still hadn't moved. She was shocked. Dumbfounded, Ethan turned back to her. You passed, he said simply. Mia blinked. What? Ethan leaned forward. Vincent tried to break you, he said. And you didn't break. Mia didn't know what to say. She felt a surge of emotion. Anger, exhaustion, relief, and something else. Something dangerous. Because for the first time, when she looked at Ethan Carter, she realized he was looking at her differently too. And that terrified her. Mia barely had time to process what had just happened. Vincent Hayes, the head chef of the Carter Grand, was gone. And Ethan Carter had been the one to throw him out. For her, the thought sent a strange, unsettling heat through her chest, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. Because the real challenge was just beginning. The moment the news spread, the entire kitchen erupted into chaos. Whispers, tension, suspicion. Some of the chefs were relieved to see Vincent go. Others, not so much. Unbelievable, one of the sous chefs muttered as Mia walked past. We lost our head chef because of her. Mia's stomach clenched. She didn't ask Ethan to fire Vincent. She didn't ask for any of this. But that didn't matter. Because now, she was a target. And the pressure? It was just beginning. That afternoon, Mia was summoned to Ethan's private office. She had never been in here before. Oh, it was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek black furniture, an expensive liquor cabinet in the corner. But the most intimidating thing in the room? Ethan Carter himself. He was standing behind his desk, arms crossed, watching her like he was evaluating something. She swallowed. "You wanted to see me?" Ethan nodded. "You passed my test," he said simply. "But now, we have a problem." Maya frowned. "What problem?" Ethan stepped closer. "Vincent is gone. The kitchen is in chaos. The restaurant has no head chef." She blinked. "And what does that have to do with me?" Ethan tilted his head. "I need someone to step up, to prove they can handle the pressure, to take charge." Mia's heart slammed against her ribs. "No," she said immediately. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," Ethan interrupted. "You just don't see it yet." Mia let out a frustrated laugh. "You think I can just take over? I was cleaning floors 2 weeks ago." Ethan didn't blink. "And now, you're here." Mia stared at him, completely thrown off balance. She wanted this. She wanted to prove herself, to show the world that she was more than just a housekeeper, with a sharp tongue. But the doubt in her mind was louder, louder than anything else. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then, he did something that shocked her. He smirked. "Fine," he said. "If you really think you don't belong, then quit." Mia's stomach dropped. "What?" Ethan leaned back against his desk, completely calm. "Walk away. Go back to cleaning rooms. Go back to struggling. Go back to—" "Stop!" Mia snapped. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Mia clenched her fists. Damn him. He was baiting her. And worse, it was working. "I don't quit," she said through gritted teeth. Ethan's smirk grew. "Good," he said. "Then prove it." Maya barely had time to process what had just happened before she was thrown into the fire. That night, Ethan invited an exclusive group of VIP guests to the restaurant, a high-stakes dinner service. And the catch? Maya was in charge. Her first real test. She stepped into the kitchen, heart pounding. Every single chef was watching her. Some of them were waiting for her to fail. Some of them wanted to see if she could actually pull this off. And Mia? She was about to find out herself. "All right," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's do this." The first 20 minutes went smoothly. Orders were coming in. The kitchen was moving like a well-oiled machine. Maya focused on quality control, making sure every plate leaving the kitchen was perfect. Then, disaster struck. One of the sous chefs, Derek, accidentally burned an entire batch of steak fillets, an order for a billionaire investor and his guests. Mia's stomach dropped. They didn't have time to start over. The steaks needed to go out in the next 4 minutes. Panic started to ripple through the kitchen. Derek looked at Mia, waiting for her reaction. For a moment she froze. Then, she grabbed a knife. "Get me fresh cuts," she ordered. Derek hesitated. "Now," she barked. Derek jumped into action. Maya took control. She moved like she was born to be here. Re-seasoning, searing, checking temperatures. Every second mattered. And when the plates went out, exactly on time, Mia finally breathed. She had done it. Mia stayed in the kitchen until the last plate left. Then, she stepped out into the dining room, heart hammering. Ethan was seated at his usual table. The billionaire investor, Gregory Langford, was speaking. Mia couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see Ethan's expression, calm, collected. Then, Gregory Langford turned. His eyes met Mia's, and he smiled. Mia's knees nearly buckled. This wasn't just a smile. This was approval, the kind that mattered. Mia turned to Ethan. He was already watching her. And when he gave her the smallest nod of recognition, Mia finally understood. She belonged here, and no one, no scandal, no doubt, no amount of sabotage was going to take this from her. The shift ended late. Mia was exhausted. She was gathering her things when Ethan appeared at the kitchen doors. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You did good, Hitanamo." Mia sighed, rubbing her forehead. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Ethan smirked. "Watching you prove yourself? Yeah, I am." Mia rolled her eyes. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Just a little. Ethan's smirk faltered. For a second something flickered in his gaze. Something dangerous. Something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. But before either of them could say anything, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His smirk vanished. Maya frowned. "What's wrong?" Ethan looked up, and for the first time since she met him, Mia saw real anger in his expression. "Someone just leaked something to the press," he said. Mia's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "A hit piece," he muttered. "About you." Mia's heart stopped. The pressure wasn't over. It was about to get worse. Mia stared at Ethan, her pulse pounding in her ears. "A hit piece?" she repeated, barely able to breathe. Ethan's expression was dark. "Yes, about you and me." Mia's stomach dropped. No, no, no. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. The article hit the internet like wildfire. Headlines screamed across every major business and gossip site. Billionaire Ethan Carter's secret relationship with a housekeeper. From cleaning toilets to dining with the elite, Maya Brooks's suspicious rise. In the Carter Grand, gold digger, or genius. How one woman landed the ultimate job promotion. Mia's hands shook as she scrolled through the article. It was bad. The story twisted everything. Her promotion, her presence in the kitchen, even her interactions with Ethan. They painted her as some kind of manipulator, suggesting she had seduced Ethan into giving her a position she didn't deserve. Worst of all, they dug into her past, her struggles, her debt, the fact that she had dropped out of culinary school. Everything was laid out like a weapon, meant to destroy her. Mia felt sick. The moment she stepped into the hotel, the whispers started. People stared, some laughed, some looked at her with pure disgust. She barely made it to the kitchen before Carla, one of the few employees who still treated her like a friend, rushed over. "Maya, Carla hesitated, glancing around nervously. "Are you okay?" Mia let out a dry laugh. "Do I look okay?" Carla sighed, lowering her voice. "People are talking?" "No kidding," Mia muttered, rubbing her temples. But then Carla's face turned serious. "It's not just the gossip, Mia. Some people," she hesitated, "some people think you set this up on purpose, that you leaked the story yourself." Mia's breath caught. "Are you kidding me?" Carla shook her head. Mia's stomach twisted. This was worse than she thought. Ethan wasn't handling it well. By the time Mia made it to his office, he had already fired 2 PR advisors and thrown his phone across the room. The moment she stepped inside, he turned to her, his gaze burning. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice controlled rage. Mia crossed her arms. "Of course I saw it." Ethan exhaled sharply, pacing. "I'll find out who did this. I'll sue them into oblivion if I have to." Mia shook her head. "It doesn't matter, Ethan. The damage is already done." He stopped pacing, turning to her. "It matters." Mia hesitated. Then she blurted it out. "People think I did this on purpose." Ethan's jaw tensed. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter," Mia said bitterly. "The entire hotel is turning against me. Everyone thinks I slept my way to the top." Ethan's expression darkened. "That's not true," he said. Mia laughed. "Do you think they care?" Silence. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. frustrated. Then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and the moment he did, his entire demeanor changed. Maya frowned. What? Ethan gritted his teeth. The person who leaked the story? He exhaled sharply. It was someone from my own company. Mia's stomach turned cold. Who? She whispered. Ethan clenched his jaw. Margaret Sinclair. Margaret Sinclair, the power-hungry board member who had opposed Mia from the start. Mia should have seen it coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. Ethan was furious. I knew. She didn't like me making decisions without her, he muttered, pacing. But this is a direct attack. Mia felt exposed, violated. She had worked so hard. And now, everything was crashing down. What do we do? Mia asked quietly. Ethan turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something dangerous in his expression, something ruthless. We fight back, he said. The next day, Ethan called an emergency board meeting. Mia wasn't invited, but that didn't stop her from listening through the door. She could hear Margaret's voice. I was simply doing what was best for the company, Margaret said smoothly. We need to protect our reputation. And frankly, Mr. Carter, this scandal is a liability. Silence. Then, Ethan's voice. Margaret, he said, his tone lethal. You're fired. A sharp gasp. You can't do that, Margaret snapped. Oh, I can, Ethan said coldly. You released confidential employee information to the press. That's an automatic breach of contract. More silence. Then Margaret's voice, this time shaking. You're making a mistake. Ethan's response was final. The only mistake was keeping you around this long. A chair scraped against the floor. Footsteps. Then, the door burst open. Margaret stormed out, furious. She saw Mia immediately, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Margaret smirked. This isn't over, she murmured. Then she walked away. Mia's stomach twisted. She had a bad feeling about this. That night, Mia sat alone in her tiny apartment. She should have felt relieved. Margaret was gone, but the damage was done. And no matter what Ethan did, no matter how much he defended her, people still believed the worst. Her chest tightened. She had worked so hard. And it wasn't enough. Mia picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over Ethan's number. Then, she did something she never thought she'd do. She typed out a message. I quit. She hesitated. Then, she hit send. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Ethan Carter is calling. Maya stared at the screen. Her chest felt tight. Her hands shook. And then, she let it ring. Because for the first time since this started, Mia wasn't sure if she had the strength to keep fighting. Mia stared at her phone, watching the screen flash with Ethan Carter's name. Her finger hovered over the answer button, but she couldn't do it. She let the call ring out. Then, her phone buzzed again. Ethan Carter. Mia, pick up. We need to talk. She clenched her jaw, tossing her phone onto the couch. There was nothing left to say. She had fought. She had tried. And in the end, it hadn't been enough. Maya pulled her knees to her chest, staring at the dim light flickering from her kitchen. For years, she had survived on her own. No help, no favors. And now, she had lost everything. Across town, Ethan was furious. He paced in his penthouse, gripping his phone so hard, his knuckles turned white. Mia had quit. And it was all because of that damn article. Because of Margaret's betrayal. Because of the people who refused to see her worth. Ethan wasn't going to let this go. He turned to his assistant, Alex, who had been quietly watching from across the room. Get me every piece of dirt you can find on Margaret Sinclair, Ethan said, voice sharp as glass. Alex hesitated. Sir, she's already been fired. I don't care. Ethan's eyes burned. She's not going to walk away from this unscathed. Alex nodded and left the room. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a frustrated hand through his hair. Then, he grabbed his keys. If Mia wouldn't answer his calls, he was going to find her himself. Mia's apartment was small, too small for her thoughts to keep echoing like this. She couldn't escape the noise in her head. The whispers, the accusations, everything she had tried to build, torn apart in a matter of days. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let herself cry. Then, a knock at the door. Maya froze. Another knock, louder this time. She knew who it was before she even opened the door. And sure enough, Ethan Carter stood outside, looking furious. "Are you seriously ignoring me now?" Ethan demanded, stepping inside. Mia folded her arms. "I quit, Ethan. There's nothing to talk about." His jaw clenched. "You don't get to just walk away." Mia let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I don't." "You're letting them win," Ethan snapped. Mia's chest tightened. "You think this is about winning," she hissed. Ethan took a sharp breath, trying to stay calm. "This is about you," he said, his voice lower. "You belong in that kitchen. You have more talent than anyone I've ever met. And you're just giving up." Mia's stomach twisted. She wanted to fight, but she was so tired. She shook her head. "It's not that simple, Ethan." "Yes," he said. "It is." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. Mia frowned. "What's that?" Ethan's expression was unreadable. "A plane ticket." Mia blinked. "A what?" Ethan handed it to her. "It's for the international culinary competition. Next month in Paris," he said. "You've been nominated as a competitor." Mia's breath hitched. "That's impossible," she whispered. Ethan's lips curled slightly. "Nothing is impossible." Mia shook her head. "No, Ethan. I just lost my job. I lost my reputation. And now, you want me to compete in a—" She exhaled sharply. "This doesn't make sense." Ethan stepped closer, voice soft. "It does," he said. "Because you're still Mia Brooks. You're still the woman who can walk into a kitchen and know exactly what's wrong with a dish in 2 seconds flat. The woman who rebuilt an entire restaurant's menu in a week. The woman who doesn't back down." Mia swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him, but part of her still whispered, "What if I fail?" Ethan must have seen the hesitation on her face, because his voice turned gentler. "I believe in you, Mia," he said, "even if you don't believe in yourself." Mia's throat tightened. She stared at the plane ticket in her hands. Then, she exhaled and made a decision. "Okay," she whispered. Ethan's lips quirked up. "Okay." Mia nodded slowly. "I'll do it." For the first time in days, she saw relief flicker across Ethan's face. Then, without thinking, he reached out. His hand brushed against hers. And suddenly, there was something charged in the air. Mia's heart pounded. Ethan's fingers lingered against her skin for just a second too long. Then, he pulled away, cleared his throat. "Good," he said, "because I wasn't taking no for an answer." Mia let out a small, shaky laugh. "Yeah," she murmured. "I figured—" The next morning, Mia stepped into the Carter Grand Hotel, not as a housekeeper, not as an employee, but as a competitor preparing for the biggest opportunity of her life. The whispers still followed her. The rumors hadn't disappeared. But this time, Mia didn't care. She was done letting people define her. Because if there was one thing she knew for sure, it was that she wasn't finished yet. The Paris skyline stretched endlessly in front of her, a dazzling city of lights and possibilities. Mia Brooks stood at the Charles de Gaulle airport, gripping the handle of her small suitcase. She still couldn't believe she was here. 2 weeks ago, she had been scrubbing floors in a 5-star hotel, dodging the cruel whispers of coworkers and watching her dreams crumble under the weight of reality. Now, now she was in Paris, about to compete in one of the most prestigious culinary competitions in the world. But she wasn't just here to prove herself. She was here to fight back, and she knew exactly who was waiting for her. As Mia walked through the airport, she spotted a tall figure standing near a black chauffeur-driven car. Ethan Carter. Dressed in a crisp, tailored navy blue suit, he looked every bit the billionaire CEO that she had once tried to avoid. His gaze locked onto her the second she stepped outside. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Ethan smirked. "You actually showed up," he said, his deep voice cutting through the crisp Parisian air. Mia rolled her eyes, adjusting the strap of her bag. "You sound surprised." "I am." Ethan stepped closer, his piercing blue eyes studying her carefully. "I was half expecting you to send a text saying you changed your mind." Mia scoffed. "Trust me, I thought about it." "Then why didn't you?" Mia took a slow breath. "Because," she said, meeting his gaze, "for once in my life, I don't want to run away." Something flickered in Ethan's expression. Then, he nodded. "Good." The ride from the airport to the Carter Grand, Paris, was filled with an unspoken tension. Mia stole glances at Ethan from the corner of her eye, wondering how he could look so unbothered, while she was trying not to spiral into a panic attack. Her first international competition, against world-class chefs, in a city where people barely took her seriously as a contestant, let alone as a chef. What if she failed? Ethan, as if sensing her thoughts, suddenly spoke. "You're not going to fail." Mia blinked. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." He smirked. "Your face is basically screaming, 'What the hell am I doing here?'" Mia exhaled. "Maybe because I'm wondering exactly that." Ethan leaned back against the leather seat of the luxury car, watching her with amusement. "Listen," he said, "no one's expecting you to walk in and win this whole thing in a day. But you made it here, Mia. That's already a victory." She glanced at him. "And if I do fail?" she asked, her voice quieter. Ethan's smirk disappeared. "Then you fail," he said simply. "But not because you never tried." Mia swallowed hard. He made it sound so simple. But she knew better. Nothing in her life had ever been simple. By the time they arrived at the Carter Grand, Paris, Mia was already exhausted. The hotel itself was breathtaking. A luxurious masterpiece sitting in the heart of the city, with golden chandeliers, towering archways, and a grand spiral staircase that made her feel like she had stepped into a different world. "This is where I'll be staying?" she asked, almost hesitant. Ethan nodded. "You're a guest. Act like one." Easier said than done. The second she stepped inside, she could feel the stares. Other competitors, hotel staff, critics. They all looked at her like she didn't belong. And one person in particular made that very clear. "Well, well." A familiar voice rang through the air. Mia stiffened. Celeste Monroe. The woman Ethan had once been linked to. A world-famous chef, and Mia's biggest rival in the competition. Celeste approached, dressed in an expensive designer gown, her dark red lips curling into a smirk. "This is a surprise," she mused, crossing her arms. "I didn't think we let housekeepers into this competition." Mia's jaw tightened. Before she could respond, Ethan stepped in smoothly. "Celeste," he said coolly. "Still as charming as ever, I see." Celeste turned to him, tilting her head. "Charming enough to know when something is out of place," she said, her eyes flickering back to Mia. Mia felt her fists clench, but instead of lashing out, she took a slow breath and smiled. "Don't worry, Celeste," Mia said sweetly. "I plan to make sure I fit right in." Celeste's smirk wavered for a fraction of a second. Ethan chuckled, and Mia knew. This was just the beginning. Mia barely had time to breathe before she was thrown into the whirlwind of preparation. The first round of the competition was tomorrow. The theme? Signature dishes that represent your culinary identity. Mia sat in the private test kitchen of the hotel, staring at her ingredients. She had no fancy techniques, no expensive culinary school training, but she had something they didn't: survival. Mia picked up a chef's knife, the weight of it solid in her grip. She wasn't here to play by their rules. She was here to rewrite them. Ethan found her still in the kitchen at midnight, testing flavors. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You do realize you need sleep, right?" Mia didn't look up. "I'll sleep after I win." Ethan smirked, stepping closer. "Confidence," he murmured. "I like it." Mia exhaled, finally setting down her knife. Then she looked at him, and for the first time since she got here, she let her guard down. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted quietly. He didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, and in the stillness of the kitchen, he reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. "You're not alone, Mia," he said softly. "No matter what happens tomorrow." Mia's throat tightened. She didn't know why she believed him, but for the first time in forever, she felt like she wasn't fighting alone. Maya Brooks stood in the grand kitchen arena of the Carter Grand Culinary Championship, her hands steady despite the racing of her heart. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. She glanced at the panel of esteemed judges seated at the long table, their expressions unreadable. Among them was Oliver Grant, the world-renowned food critic whose opinion could make or break a career. And seated next to him, Celeste Monroe. Maya's stomach twisted at the sight of the woman who had done nothing but try to break her confidence since she arrived. The tension in the air was thick, a mixture of expectation, competition, and something dangerously close to hostility. Then, the announcer's voice rang out over the intercom. "Chefs, you have 2 hours to prepare a dish that represents your culinary identity. Your time starts now." The room exploded into motion. Mia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the ingredients she had planned: fresh butter, garlic, thyme, rosemary, and the star of the dish, a perfectly aged cut of beef. She was going to make something that spoke to her past, something that told her story. A dish that was both humble and powerful. A seared steak, cooked in brown butter, and served with a delicate but vibrant sauce that showcased her ability to elevate simple flavors. As she moved swiftly through the kitchen, she felt the eyes of the other competitors on her. Some were curious, others downright hostile. And one of them was watching her with particular interest: Celeste. Halfway through the competition, Mia reached for her pre-measured salt, but it was gone. Her eyes widened. She had left it right here. Frantic, she searched the counter, but the container had vanished. Her heart pounded. No salt meant her dish would lack balance, depth, everything it needed to stand out. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it, sitting on Celeste's station. Mia's blood boiled. Celeste was calmly whisking a sauce, her smirk barely hidden. Mia clenched her fists. This was no accident. Celeste had stolen her ingredient. For a split second, rage surged inside Mia. She could call her out, demand justice. But then, she stopped. Number Celeste wanted a reaction. She wanted to prove that Mia didn't belong here. Instead of losing control, Mia took a slow breath. If Celeste wanted to play dirty, then Mia would play smarter. Mia scanned the kitchen. There, on the herb rack, a small jar of fleur de sel, a delicate, flaky salt, often used for finishing dishes. It wasn't ideal, but if she adjusted her technique, she could make it work. With only 20 minutes left, she pivoted. She incorporated the salt flakes into the butter, letting it infuse the dish, rather than seasoning it directly. It was a gamble, but she refused to let Celeste win. The final minutes counted down. She plated her dish carefully, the seared steak glistening under the lights, the sauce drizzled perfectly. And as the announcer yelled, "Time's up," Maya stepped back, her chest rising and falling with exertion. Now, all she could do was wait. One by one, the judges tasted the dishes. Mia stood rigid as Oliver Grant lifted his fork, cutting into her steak and taking a bite. A pause, a sip of water. Then, he turned to her. "Maya Brooks," he said, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, why this dish?" Mia exhaled slowly. "It represents where I come from," she said. "I grew up cooking simple meals, but I learned how to make the most of every ingredient. This is my way of showing that simplicity, when done right, can be just as powerful as the most complex dish." The panel nodded, and then Celeste's dish was judged next. Oliver Grant lifted his fork again, taking a bite of her elegantly plated seafood creation. A pause. Then his brows furrowed. He took another bite. His eyes flicked up to Celeste, a hint of disapproval in his gaze. "Chef Monroe," he said slowly, "this dish is unbalanced. The salt is overpowering." Mia's heart pounded. Celeste's expression barely changed, but Mia saw it, the slight twitch of her jaw. She overseasoned it, and suddenly Mia knew. Celeste had stolen her salt. But in her arrogance, she hadn't adjusted for the difference in concentration. It was a mistake that even a world-class chef couldn't cover up. Mia held back a smirk. Karma was a beautiful thing. After what felt like an eternity, the final rankings were announced. Mia held her breath. The announcer cleared his throat. And the winner of round one, with an exceptional balance of flavors and a dish that captured the essence of identity, is Mia Brooks. The crowd erupted in applause. Mia's vision blurred for a second. She had won. She had actually won. She turned slightly and caught Celeste's icy glare. This wasn't over. But for now, Mia would enjoy the victory. That night, back at the hotel, Ethan found her on the rooftop terrace, staring out over the twinkling Paris skyline. He approached silently, standing beside her. "You did it," he said. Mia let out a breathy laugh. "Yeah, I did." Ethan studied her. "You don't seem happy." Mia shrugged. "Winning one round doesn't mean I've won the war." Ethan smirked. "Maybe not. But you proved something today." Mia looked at him. "And what's that?" "That you don't just belong here," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You're meant to be here." Mia felt something shift inside her. Because for the first time in her life, she believed it too. The tension in the competition skyrocketed after Mia's unexpected victory. She had proven herself, publicly, undeniably. But with every step forward, the forces against her grew stronger. Celeste Monroe wasn't the type to forgive and forget. Margaret Sinclair, the board member who had tried to destroy Mia's reputation, wasn't the type to back down. And Ethan Carter, he wasn't just a bystander in this battle anymore. He was fighting for Mia, and for the first time, that put his entire company in danger. Mia sat at a quiet corner table in the competitors' lounge, nursing a cup of tea as whispers swirled around her. Did you see Celeste's face when they called Mia's name? She's furious. She won't let this go. Mia pretended not to listen. But she knew the truth. No, this wasn't just about cooking anymore. This was about power, about status, and she had just humiliated one of the most powerful chefs in the world. Celeste wasn't going to let that stand. Mia barely had time to take a breath before someone slid into the seat across from her. A low voice murmured, "You should be careful." Mia's eyes flicked up, startled. It was Oliver Grant, the legendary food critic. She straightened, trying to keep her expression neutral. Careful? Oliver swirled the espresso in his tiny cup, watching her like a puzzle he was still solving. "You've made enemies," he said casually. "Some of them don't lose gracefully." Mia swallowed. "I didn't cheat," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I won fair and square." Oliver's lips curled into a hint of a smile. "That's what makes you dangerous," he murmured. "And that's why they'll try to tear you down." Mia's fingers tightened around her cup. She had spent years being underestimated. But now they feared her. The next morning, Mia woke to chaos. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. She groggily reached for it and saw headlines, dozens of them. MIA Brooks, scandal behind the stove. Ethan Carter's mistress, rigging the competition. Did a hotel maid just buy her way to the top? Mia's stomach dropped. Her hands shook as she clicked on one of the articles. Photos, taken out of context. Her and Ethan in Paris, them sitting close together at the celebratory dinner after her win. A blurred shot of Ethan touching her hand, a moment so fleeting she barely remembered it. But the captions twisted the story. And the worst part? The source of the article was anonymous. Mia didn't need to guess who was behind it. She already knew. Ethan stormed into the hotel's private lounge minutes later, his phone clenched in his fist. Mia was already there, pacing. She turned to him, eyes flashing. "Tell me you didn't know this was coming." Ethan cursed under his breath. "I didn't." He tossed his phone onto the table. "Margaret Sinclair is behind this. She has connections in media. She wants to discredit you before the final round." Mia's stomach twisted. "She's trying to ruin me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's trying to ruin us?" The words sent a different kind of chill down Mia's spine. She hadn't realized how deeply Ethan had become entangled in her fight. This wasn't just about the competition anymore. This was about them. But before she could respond, the door slammed open, and standing there, completely unfazed, was Celeste Monroe. Celeste walked in, like she owned the place, her sharp designer heels clicking against the marble floor. She was calm, elegant, but her eyes burned with something dark. "Quite the scandal, isn't it?" she purred, looking straight at Mia. Mia's hands clenched into fists. "I don't have time for your games." Celeste laughed, a slow, practiced sound. "Oh, sweetheart." She stepped closer, her voice dropping into something venomous. "This isn't a game. This is war." Mia's breath hitched. Ethan stepped forward, his presence radiating power. "If you came here to threaten her, you can leave now." Celeste tilted her head. "Threaten?" she echoed. "Oh no, Ethan. I came to offer her a way out." Mia's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Celeste's smirk widened. "You can still walk away, Mia," she said smoothly. "Withdraw from the final round. Let the professionals handle it." Mia's blood boiled. She stepped closer, her voice steady. "You're scared of me." Celeste's expression flickered. Just for a second. Mia saw it. She had gotten under her skin. Celeste's jaw tightened. "I have worked for years to build my reputation. I won't let some nobody waltz in and take my place." Mia's heart pounded, but her voice remained calm. "I earned my spot," she said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Celeste's lips pressed into a thin line. She took a step back. "Fine," she murmured. "Have it your way." Then, with a chilling smile, she turned to Ethan. "But when this is over, she won't have a career left." Then she walked out, her heels clicking like a metronome of doom. The second Celeste was gone, Ethan turned to Mia. "We need to hit back," he said. Mia shook her head. "I don't want to fight dirty." Celeste's lips pressed into a thin line. She took a step back. "Fine," she murmured. "Have it your way." Then, with a chilling smile, she turned to Ethan. "But when this is over, she won't have a career left." Then she walked out, her heels clicking like a metronome of doom. The second Celeste was gone, Ethan turned to Mia. "We need to hit back," he said. Mia shook her head. "I don't want to fight dirty." Ethan's gaze softened. "Not dirty." Smart, Mia exhaled. "What are you thinking?" Ethan pulled out his phone. "We control the narrative," he said. He called his publicist, arranging for a press interview that night. And when Mia stepped in front of the cameras, she didn't let the fear show. She told her truth. She had worked her whole life for this opportunity. She had fought for every chance she'd ever had. And she wasn't going to stop now. The internet erupted in support. The public turned against the smear campaign. And the final round of the competition? It was about to be the most intense battle of Mia's life. The moment Mia stepped into the competition arena, she knew. This wasn't just about cooking anymore. It was a war zone. Celeste Monroe stood at the opposite end of the grand kitchen, her sharp blue eyes locked onto Mia like a predator analyzing its prey. The judges, food critics, and an entire live stream audience were watching. The stakes were higher than ever. This was the final round of the International Culinary Masters Championship. And for Mia Brooks, this was everything. If she won, she would prove that talent, not privilege, was what mattered. If she lost, she'd be just another nobody who got lucky. The clock was ticking, and the battle for her future had begun. The head judge, a legendary Michelin-starred chef, Anton Leclerc, stepped onto the platform. His deep voice echoed through the grand hall. "For this final round, we challenge you to create a dish that represents your journey as a chef." Mia's heart skipped a beat. Her journey. It wasn't filled with culinary school lessons or gourmet kitchens. It was nights spent scrubbing hotel floors. It was cheap groceries, making magic out of leftovers. It was a dream she had to bury. Until Ethan Carter saw something in her that she had stopped seeing in herself. Mia took a deep breath. She already knew what she would make. As the timer began counting down, the chefs moved swiftly, gathering their ingredients. Mia focused, her hands working instinctively. But then, a voice, smooth as silk, cut through the air. "Brave choice, Mia." Mia didn't stop chopping, but she knew Celeste was smirking. Celeste continued, her voice low. "A dish that represents your journey. What's that going to be? Microwave noodles and expired vegetables?" Mia's grip tightened around the knife. She knew what Celeste was trying to do. She was baiting her, trying to make her second-guess herself. Mia exhaled slowly, keeping her voice calm. "You should focus on your own dish, Celeste." Celeste chuckled. "Oh, I am, sweetheart. But let's be honest, you're out of your league." Mia didn't respond. She let her cooking do the talking. Maya worked with precision, her instincts guiding every movement. She chose seared scallops with a corn puree, inspired by the comfort food her mother used to make before things fell apart. She added caramelized onions, crispy pancetta, and a touch of truffle oil, elevating a humble memory into a masterpiece. But the secret ingredient? A spicy citrus glaze. It was a nod to her past struggles, the bitterness of life, balanced by the unexpected sweetness of second chances. As the dish came together, the aroma filled the arena. Judges murmured. Even the camera crew zoomed in, captivated by her work. Mia stole a glance at Celeste. For the first time, Celeste's confidence wavered. With only 10 minutes left, the kitchen was a flurry of movement. Mia reached for her final garnish. And then, her plate slipped. It wasn't an accident. Celeste had brushed past her, just enough to cause a collision. Mia's beautifully plated dish landed on the floor. Gasps rippled through the audience. The judge's eyes widened. For a moment, time stood still. Mia felt the crushing weight of panic creeping in. But then, she caught Ethan's gaze from the VIP section. His expression was steady, unwavering, like he was silently telling her, "Get up, fight." Mia's heart pounded. She had 5 minutes left. She wasn't going to let Celeste win like this. Maya worked faster than she ever had. She grabbed a clean plate, started again from scratch. Scallops seared to perfection. The sauce reduced in record time. Every movement was controlled, precise. The audience watched in awe as a woman who had every reason to give up refused to back down. Celeste, she was watching too, and for the first time, Maya saw panic in her eyes. The timer buzzed. Hands up. It was done. The judges went to Celeste's dish first. She had prepared a delicate truffle risotto with lobster medallions, plated elegantly. The first judge took a bite. A long pause. "It's good." Mia recognized the tone. They weren't amazed. They were expecting more. Then, it was Mia's turn. Judge Anton Leclerc lifted his fork, took a bite, and closed his eyes. The room went silent. Then he looked at her. "This," he said, voice thick with emotion, "is flawless." The other judges followed. The verdict was unanimous. Mia Brooks had won. Mia barely had time to process it before the cameras turned to Celeste. The woman who had spent years at the top of the culinary world was now standing in second place. Celeste's face was unreadable. Then she let out a small laugh, sharp, bitter. "Well played," she murmured. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the competition hall. Mia watched her go, not victorious, just relieved. The battle was over, and she had won it fair and square. The after-party was a blur of celebration, champagne, and flashes from the media. Mia had done it. She had carved her name into the culinary world on her own terms. And yet, as the night wound down, she found herself on the hotel rooftop, looking out over the glittering city. Footsteps. She turned. Ethan. He didn't speak at first, just took in the view beside her. Then, "You did it," Mia exhaled. "Yeah." Ethan looked at her. "Number you didn't just win a competition. You proved them all wrong." Mia turned to him, searching his face, and for the first time she saw it clearly. This wasn't just about business. It had never been. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Mia's breath hitched. "I had a speech prepared," he said, voice lower now. "Something about how you changed my life, how you made me see things differently. But the truth is, I don't need words." He opened the box. A ring. Simple. Elegant. Ethan stepped closer. "Maya Brooks, will you marry me?" Mia stared at him. At the man who had once been a stranger in a penthouse suite, who had challenged her, who had believed in her. And she knew. Her answer was always going to be yes. The moment Mia said yes, the world around them seemed to disappear. The rooftop lights shimmered softly. The city below, a sea of golden lights. Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Hospitality Group, was standing in front of her, holding out an engagement ring, and she, Mia Brooks, a former housekeeper, had just won one of the most prestigious culinary competitions in the world. Yet, despite all of that, her heart was racing for a completely different reason. Because this moment, this proposal, it wasn't just a milestone in her career. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that terrified her just as much as it excited her. Ethan was watching her, his blue eyes steady, waiting for her to say something. Mia blinked. her fingers tightening slightly around his. She had already said yes. So why did she feel like she couldn't breathe? She swallowed. Ethan, are you sure about this? His brow furrowed slightly. What kind of question is that? Mia let out a nervous laugh. I mean, we've only known each other for a few months. A few months ago, I was mopping floors in your hotel. Now, I'm standing here, holding an engagement ring. She shook her head. It's insane. Ethan tilted his head, studying her. You're right, he said simply. Oh, as Mia blinked. I am? Yes. His lips quirked into a slight smirk. It is insane. Completely. But tell me something. He stepped closer. Do you love me? Mia opened her mouth, her heart thudding against her ribs. Did she? It wasn't the kind of love story people expected. It wasn't flowers and slow dances and candlelit dinners. It was arguments in kitchens, stolen glances in hallways, challenges, trust, and the undeniable fact that she had never in her life met someone who saw her the way he did. She took a shaky breath. Yes, she whispered. Ethan's smirk softened into something real. Then, that's all that matters. Mia stared at him. How could he be so certain, when she still felt like she was walking a tightrope over everything she had ever known? Ethan chuckled, sensing her hesitation. I'm not asking you to change, Mia. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm asking you to be with me, to build something with me. That's it. Mia exhaled. Maybe it really was that simple. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she had nothing to run from. So she nodded. And this time, when Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, she didn't hesitate. The next morning, Mia woke up to chaos. Her phone was blowing up with messages. Carla. MIA. Holy shit. Check the news. Her stomach dropped. She opened the news app. And there it was. Billionaire Ethan Carter proposes to Maya Brooks, the former housekeeper who won the culinary world's biggest title. Mia's throat went dry. The article wasn't just about their engagement. It rehashed everything. How she started as a maid, how Ethan gave her a chance, how she won the competition, and, of course, how people were already accusing her of being a gold digger. Mia squeezed her eyes shut. She should have known this was coming. She should have been prepared for it. But nothing could prepare her for seeing thousands of comments under the article. She played the long game. Smart girl. A maid? Come on, Carter. You can do better. This is what happens when rich men think with their emotions. She got lucky, huh? That's all. Mia's hands shook as she scrolled. It didn't matter that she had worked harder than anyone. It didn't matter that she had proven herself in front of the entire world. People would always see her as the maid who got lucky. She threw her phone onto the bed and buried her face in her hands. How was she supposed to deal with this? Good morning, fiancé. Mia jumped as Ethan strolled into the bedroom, shirtless, towel draped around his neck. She glared at him. Are you always this calm when the internet is tearing someone apart? Ethan raised an eyebrow. You saw the news. Mia let out a dry laugh. Kind of hard to miss when the whole world is calling me a gold digger. Ethan sighed, walked over, and took her phone from the bed. He scrolled through the comments, then set the phone aside. Then to Mia's shock, he smirked. This is nothing. Mia stared at him. Nothing. People are acting like I scammed my way into your life. Ethan crossed his arms. And? Since when do we care what idiots on the internet think? Mia opened her mouth, then closed it. Okay. He had a point. But still. This is your world, Ethan. You grew up in it. I didn't. You're used to people making up stories about you. I'm not. Ethan's expression softened. He sat down next to her on the bed. Mia. He took her hand. You didn't scam your way into my life. I know that, but no. Listen to me. His voice was firm. You didn't get here because of me. You got here because you're talented as hell. Because you never gave up. Because you refused to back down. Even when people like Celeste and Vincent tried to break you. Mia swallowed hard. And, he continued, brushing his thumb over her knuckles, if people want to believe otherwise, let them. Mia exhaled slowly. She wanted to believe that. She really did. But deep down, she knew. This was just the beginning. By noon, Ethan had made a decision. If people were going to talk about Mia, then he was going to give them something to talk about. And so, he called a press conference. Mia nearly fainted when he told her. A press conference? She repeated wide-eyed. Ethan smirked. Let's make something clear. If people want to doubt you, they can do it to your face. Mia stared at him. Was he serious? The man had just asked her to marry him. And now, he was throwing her into the spotlight? Mia wanted to kill him. But at the same time, she knew he was right. This wasn't about proving herself to the world. It was about showing them that she wasn't afraid. She took a deep breath and nodded. Let's do it, Ethan grinned. Good. Because the world's about to see exactly what Mia Brooks is made of. Mia stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of her blazer with shaky hands. She wasn't used to dressing like this. Sleek black trousers, a fitted blazer, heels that made her stand taller than usual. She had spent years in kitchen uniforms, aprons, and housekeeping attire. Now, she was about to step in front of the world as Ethan Carter's fiancée, not as a maid, not as a struggling chef, but as someone who had fought her way to this moment. The thought made her stomach twist. Behind her, Ethan stood leaning against the doorframe, watching her with his usual calm confidence. You're going to be fine. His voice was steady, assured. Mia let out a laugh, but it was forced. Oh, yeah? Tell that to the thousands of people who think I slept my way into success. Ethan's jaw tightened at that. He stepped forward, his hands resting on her shoulders, turning her so she could face him. Forget them. His blue eyes locked onto hers. This press conference isn't for them. It's for you. For us. Mia swallowed hard. She wished she could have even half of his confidence. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't just about defending herself. It was about claiming her place. It was about proving once and for all that she wasn't going anywhere. She took a deep breath and nodded. Let's do this. The conference room at the Carter Grand Hotel was packed. Journalists, photographers, reporters. The moment Mia and Ethan stepped inside, the flashes went off like fireworks. Mia felt a wave of nerves wash over her, but Ethan's hand on the small of her back kept her steady. He led her to the podium, where a long table was set up. As soon as they sat down, the questions started flying. Ethan, is it true that you were having an affair with Mia while she was working as a maid? Mia, how do you respond to claims that you manipulated your way into Ethan's life? Is this engagement just a PR stunt? Mia's hands curled into fists under the table. Ethan, however, remained completely composed. He leaned forward, tapping the microphone. Let's get one thing straight, he said, his voice calm but firm. The room went silent. Mia Brooks didn't manipulate anyone. She didn't seduce anyone. And she certainly didn't sleep her way to success. He glanced at Mia, then back at the reporters. She got here because she's one of the most talented chefs I've ever met. Because she worked harder than anyone in the industry. Because she refused to give up. The room buzzed with murmurs. A reporter raised her hand. So, you're saying her success had nothing to do with you. Ethan smirked. She won a culinary championship in front of international judges. I wasn't on that panel. She did that on her own. Mia glanced at Ethan, grateful. But she knew this wasn't over. There was one more thing that needed to be addressed. She leaned toward the mic. I know. People will keep talking. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was pounding. They'll say, I got lucky. That I don't deserve this. She met the eyes of every reporter in the room. And to them I say, watch me. The room exploded with questions, but Mia stood up, turning to Ethan. We're done here. Ethan grinned, standing as well. And with that, they walked out together. And for the first time, Mia felt like she had truly taken control of her own story. The press conference was everywhere. Social media exploded. Team Mia started trending. Some people still doubted her. Some still spread rumors. But, for the first time, there were just as many people defending her. And that was enough. But while Mia and Ethan were celebrating their victory, someone else was plotting. Margaret Sinclair, the power-hungry board member who had tried to sabotage Mia from the beginning. She wasn't finished, and she had one final move to play. The next morning, Mia and Ethan were woken up by Ethan's assistant, who barged into their suite with a panicked look. You need to see this. She handed Ethan a folder. He opened it and froze. Maya leaned over, her stomach twisting as she read the contents. It was an official complaint filed against her. A false accusation stating that she had leaked company secrets to the press. Mia's hands shook. What the hell is this? Ethan's expression was ice cold. This, he said, is Margaret's last attempt to bring you down. Mia felt rage bubble inside her. She had fought too hard to let this happen. Ethan clenched his jaw. She wants to force me into a corner, to make me choose between the company and you. Mia's stomach dropped. Ethan would never choose the company over her. But if Margaret succeeded, she could destroy everything. Mia took a deep breath. Then we fight. Ethan turned to her. Are you sure? Mia nodded. Margaret Sinclair wants a war. She lifted her chin. Then, let's give her one. Mia Brooks had fought too hard to let Margaret Sinclair win. She had endured humiliation, been called a gold digger, and had her talent questioned at every turn. And now, Margaret was playing dirty, using legal tactics to frame her. But Mia wasn't that scared, powerless girl anymore. She was ready for war. Ethan sat at his office desk, his jaw tight, eyes burning with anger, as he read through the false complaint. Mia paced behind him, her hands clenched into fists. She's really willing to destroy the company just to get rid of me, she muttered. Ethan set the folder down. She's not going to win. His voice was like steel. Mia turned to him. What do we do? Ethan exhaled, his mind already racing with solutions. We expose her. Mia frowned. How? Ethan smirked. She thinks she's the only one with secrets? Let's remind her who she's up against. He picked up his phone and dialed. Daniel, I need you to dig up everything on Margaret Sinclair. I want every shady deal, every offshore account, every skeleton in her closet. I don't care how deep you have to go. Just find me something. Mia swallowed. She had seen Ethan in business mode before. But this was a man on a mission. And he was coming for blood. The next morning, the hotel was buzzing with gossip. Margaret's legal team had filed formal charges against Mia. It was all over the news. Breaking. Maya Brooks, former maid turned chef, accused of leaking corporate secrets. Mia felt her stomach drop as she watched the headlines. They're making me look like a criminal, she whispered. Ethan slammed his laptop shut. She's getting desperate. Mia took a deep breath. We need to hit back. Fast. Ethan nodded. We will. Later that night, Ethan's investigator Daniel sent a message. Got something. Meet me in private. Mia and Ethan drove to a secluded spot, where Daniel handed Ethan a USB drive. You're gonna love this, Daniel said, smirking. Ethan plugged the USB into his laptop. The screen lit up with financial records, leaked emails, and contracts, all showing that Margaret had been embezzling funds from the company for years. Mia's eyes widened. This is enough to destroy her. Ethan grinned. Time to play our hand. The next morning, Ethan called for an emergency board meeting. Margaret arrived smug, expecting Ethan to cave under pressure. The board members sat in silence as Ethan projected the evidence onto a large screen. Margaret's smile disappeared. The room went dead silent. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Would you like to explain this, Margaret? She stammered. This is ridiculous. You expect the board to believe some fabricated documents? Ethan smirked. Oh, these aren't fabricated. In fact, they're already on their way to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the IRS. Margaret's face drained of color. You wouldn't. Ethan crossed his arms. Oh, I would. Mia watched in awe as Margaret's empire crumbled in front of her. The board turned against her immediately. Margaret tried to fight back, but it was over. Security escorted her out of the building. And just like that, Margaret Sinclair was finished. The media went wild. Breaking. Margaret Sinclair, former board member of Carter Hospitality, arrested for fraud and embezzlement. Mia's name was cleared. Ethan gave a public statement, shutting down the rumors once and for all. And finally, Mia felt free. Ethan threw a lavish party to celebrate their victory. Mia stood by his side, sipping champagne, feeling lighter than ever. You did it, she whispered. Ethan chuckled. We did it. They clinked glasses, and for the first time, there were no more shadows looming over them, no more whispers behind their backs, just them, together, and ready for whatever came next. The storm had passed. Mia Brooks had won. No longer the housekeeper who had been mocked, underestimated, and slandered. She had fought for her place and earned respect in the industry. Ethan Carter had stood by her side, proving that power wasn't just about money, but about integrity, loyalty, and love. And now, as the dust settled, a new chapter was about to begin, a chapter she never saw coming. The day after Margaret Sinclair's downfall, Mia found herself trending online. Mia Brooks, from housekeeper to culinary star. The woman who took down a corporate giant. The chef who beat the system. Mia sat on the couch in Ethan's penthouse, scrolling through the articles. It felt unreal. She had spent years struggling just to get by, taking whatever job she could to pay the bills, keep food on the table, and protect Leo. And now, the world knew her name. She turned to Ethan, who was sitting beside her, sipping his coffee, watching her with a knowing smile. What? She asked, raising an eyebrow. You're famous, he said, tilting his head. How does it feel? Mia scoffed. Terrifying. Ethan chuckled. You'll get used to it. She exhaled, setting her phone aside. So, what now? Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I have an idea. Mia narrowed her eyes. Oh no. I know that look. That's the Ethan Carter mastermind face. What are you planning? He smirked. A restaurant. Mia blinked. What? I want to invest in your future, Mia. A restaurant. Your name on it. Your menu. Your vision. She froze. You're serious? Always? Mia's heart pounded. A restaurant. Her own place. Her dream. One she had buried so deep because it had always seemed impossible. And yet, here he was, offering it to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. She shook her head, laughing. This is insane. Ethan grinned. That's what you said when I asked you to work in the kitchen. Look how that turned out. Mia bit her lip, her mind racing. It was risky. It was big. But it was everything she had ever wanted. Slowly she exhaled and met his gaze. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Let's do it. Ethan's smile widened. Good. 2 months later, Mia stood in the middle of her brand new restaurant, Brooks and Carter, watching as the doors opened for the first time. The place was stunning, warm, inviting, but with an air of sophistication. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, and the menu? Harry in every dish, every flavor. It was all crafted from her journey, her past, her passion. The press was there, cameras flashing, food critics already seated. It was the biggest night of her life. And standing beside her, in a perfectly tailored suit, was Ethan. Ready? He asked, slipping his hand into hers. Mia took a deep breath. She had never been more ready. After the successful opening night, Ethan led Mia to the rooftop of the restaurant. The city lights stretched before them, the air warm, the moment perfect. Mia turned to him, smiling. So, what did you think of the first night? Ethan grinned. Flawless, just like you. She rolled her eyes. Smooth, Carter. He chuckled. But then, his face grew serious. Mia's stomach fluttered. What is it? She asked. Ethan took a step closer. I have something for you. Mia's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Oh. Her heart stopped. Ethan Carter, the man who had once terrified her, the man she had fought with, laughed with, fallen for, was getting down on one knee. She clamped a hand over her mouth. Mia Brooks, he said, his voice steady, warm, filled with love. You changed my life. You challenged me. You made me believe in something more than just success. You made me believe in us. Mia felt tears sting her eyes. I love you, he continued, and I don't want to spend another day without knowing you're mine. Forever. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. So, Mia, will you marry me? Mia let out a shaky laugh, barely able to breathe. And then, she nodded furiously. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, then stood up, cupping her face and kissing her deeply. Mia melted into him, her heart bursting. It was real. It was happening. She was going to marry Ethan Carter. Mia stood at the grand opening of their second restaurant, holding Ethan's hand. They had built something together. A business, a partnership, a legacy. And in just a few months, she placed a hand over her growing belly. They would be welcoming a baby. Ethan noticed and placed his hand over hers, smiling. You're glowing, he murmured. Mia laughed. I'm huge. He kissed her forehead. You're perfect. Mia sighed, looking around at everything they had built together. Their love had been tested. They had fought battles, but they had won, together. And as she looked at the man she loved, she knew this was only the beginning. And just like that, Mia and Ethan's journey proves one thing. Life has a funny way of leading us exactly where we're meant to be. From a cleaning staff struggling to survive to a celebrated chef standing beside the man who saw her worth before she even did. Mia fought for her dreams, and she won. But what about you? Do you believe in fate, in second chances, in unexpected love stories that change everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you loved this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we have more heartfelt, inspiring, and unexpected stories coming your way. Who knows? The next one might just be the story you've been waiting for. See you in the next video.